The shrimp had been deveined with surgical precision. The roux had been stirred for exactly 47 minutes until it reached the color of dark chocolate. The holy trinity of onions, celery, and bell pepper had been diced into pieces so uniform they could have been measured with a ruler. Everything was perfect. I knew it was perfect. 20 years of cooking for a man who found fault in everything had made me obsessive about details. But as I heard Vernon's car pull into the driveway, my stomach clenched with the familiar anxiety that preceded every meal I served him. Our 20th wedding anniversary. I had spent 3 days planning this dinner, sourcing ingredients from specialty stores across Atlanta, practicing the timing until I could execute it in my sleep. The menu was a love letter to my New Orleans roots: shrimp and andouille gumbo, cornbread with honey butter, collard greens braised with smoked turkey, and for dessert, a bourbon pecan pie with vanilla bean ice cream. It was the kind of meal my grandmother would have been proud of, the kind of meal that should make a husband feel blessed to have a wife who could cook like this. But Vernon was not that kind of husband. "Something smells good." He walked into the kitchen, loosening his tie, his eyes scanning the stovetop with the critical assessment of a health inspector. "What's all this? Our anniversary dinner?" I smiled, trying to project confidence I did not feel. 20 years. I wanted to make it special. Vernon dipped a spoon into the gumbo and tasted it. I watched his face, searching for approval, hating myself for needing it so badly. He set down the spoon. "Did you use enough cayenne? It tastes a little flat." The gumbo was not flat. I had tasted it myself not 10 minutes ago, and it was perfect. The heat built slowly, the way good gumbo should, warming you from the inside without overwhelming the other flavors. "I can add more if you want," I heard myself say, the words automatic after 2 decades of accommodation. "And the roux." Vernon peered into the pot. "Is it supposed to be this dark? My mother always said a roux should be the color of peanut butter." "Your mother's roux tastes like wallpaper paste," I thought but did not say. "Your mother thinks seasoning is a sin, and vegetables should be boiled until they surrender." "It's a chocolate roux," I explained, keeping my voice even. "Traditional for gumbo. The darker the roux, the deeper the flavor." "If you say so." Vernon shrugged and headed for the living room. "Let me know when dinner's ready, and I hope the cornbread isn't dry this time." I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the aromas of a meal I had poured my heart into, and felt the familiar ache of disappointment settle into my chest. 20 years. 20 years of meals that were never quite right, never quite good enough, always somehow lacking despite my best efforts. I remembered when it had started. The early days of our marriage, when I was 24 and full of dreams. I had told Vernon about my plan to open a restaurant someday, a place that served elevated Southern cuisine, the kind of food my grandmother had taught me to make. He had smiled and called me ambitious. "But let's be realistic," he had said, his hand on my cheek in a gesture that felt loving at the time. "Restaurants fail all the time. Why don't you get a stable job first, save some money, and we can talk about the restaurant later?" Later never came. Instead, I became an administrative manager at a medical supply company, and Vernon became a partner at his accounting firm, and somewhere along the way, my dreams got filed away in a drawer I stopped opening. The criticisms had started small. A comment here, a suggestion there. Maybe a little less salt next time. The chicken was a bit dry, but it's okay. My mother makes her pot roast differently, but yours is fine. Fine. That word became the soundtrack of my cooking life. Everything I made was fine, acceptable, adequate, never wonderful, never extraordinary. Never the kind of food that made people close their eyes in pleasure and ask for the recipe. I had internalized it so completely that I no longer trusted my own palate. I would taste something I had made, think it was good, and then hear Vernon's voice in my head finding fault. Eventually, I stopped believing my own judgment. If Vernon said it was flat, it must be flat. If he said it was dry, it must be dry. He was just trying to help me improve. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my memories. Vernon's mother, Dolores, had arrived for our anniversary dinner. Of course she had. Vernon had invited her without asking me, as he always did for special occasions. Nadine, Dolores swept into the house without waiting to be welcomed, her nose already wrinkling at the aromas from the kitchen. What is that smell? It's very pungent. Gumbo, I said. A New Orleans recipe. Ah. Dolores made a sound that conveyed volumes of disapproval. Well, I'm sure it will be interesting. Interesting. Another word that meant not quite right. Dinner was a masterclass in subtle humiliation. Vernon and Dolores ping-ponged criticisms between them while I sat in silence, watching them pick at food that I knew was exceptional. The cornbread is a bit dense, don't you think? Dolores asked her son. I noticed that too, and the greens are over-seasoned. Your grandmother made greens with just a touch of salt. Simple. Clean. Nadine likes to experiment. Vernon smiled at me, a smile that looked supportive but carried an edge. She's always trying new things. That's what happens when you learn to cook from someone who never went to culinary school. My grandmother had been the finest cook I had ever known. She had learned from her mother, who had learned from hers, a chain of knowledge stretching back generations. They had cooked for families, for churches, for community gatherings where people lined up for plates of food that tasted like love, made edible. But according to Vernon and his mother, that lineage meant nothing. Without formal training, without credentials, my cooking would always be amateur, would always be not quite right. The twins sat quietly through the meal, Maya and Marcus Jr., both 22 now, both watching their parents with the careful attention of children who had learned to navigate a difficult dynamic. Maya caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, sympathetic smile. She had always been my defender, had always insisted that my cooking was delicious despite what her father said. Mom's food is amazing, she said now, her voice cutting through Dolores's latest critique. Grandma Jo's recipes are part of our heritage. I think it's beautiful that Mom keeps them alive. Vernon's expression cooled. No one's saying the food is bad, Maya. We're just offering constructive feedback. That's how people improve. Nadine knows we only want the best for her, Dolores added. A good cook is always open to criticism. I said nothing. I had learned long ago that defending myself only prolonged the conversation. Better to let them say their piece and move on. Better to swallow the hurt and keep the peace. After dinner, I stood alone at the kitchen sink, washing dishes that could have gone in the dishwasher, but gave me an excuse to be alone. The water ran over my hands that had learned to julienne vegetables at 8 years old, hands that had rolled out biscuit dough beside my grandmother every Sunday morning, hands that had prepared thousands of meals over 20 years of marriage. Vernon's voice echoed in my memory. Not enough cayenne. My mother does it differently, a bit dry, a bit dense, over-seasoned, under-seasoned, not quite right, never quite right. But as I stood there, something shifted. A thought rose up from somewhere deep inside me, a voice I had not heard in years. What if he's wrong? What if the gumbo was perfect and he just couldn't taste it? What if the cornbread was exactly the right texture and his mother's preference for dry, crumbly bread was the problem? What if 20 years of criticism had nothing to do with my cooking and everything to do with keeping me small? I looked at my hands in the soapy water. The hands my grandmother had praised. The hands that had won a blue ribbon at the church cooking competition when I was 16, before Vernon, before I learned to doubt myself. Tomorrow, I would start cooking again. Really cooking. Not to please Vernon or his mother, but to remember who I was before I became someone else's disappointment. I did not know it yet, but I was about to change my life. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed beside Vernon, listening to his steady breathing, thinking about the conversation that had not happened at dinner. The things I had wanted to say but hadn't. Your mother's cooking is bland and uninspired. I have been serving you extraordinary food for 20 years, and you have been too small to recognize it. My grandmother was a better cook than anyone in your family has ever been, and I am her legacy. But I had said none of those things. I had smiled and cleared the dishes and accepted the criticism as I always did. And now, in the darkness, I wondered, When had I become this person? When had I stopped fighting for myself? I thought about my grandmother, Josephine Williams, who had raised me after my mother died when I was 7. Grandma Jo had been a force of nature, a woman who took no nonsense and gave no quarter. She had run a small catering business out of her kitchen, feeding wedding receptions and funeral repasts and every community event in between. People had driven for hours to taste her cooking. She had been famous in New Orleans, a legend among those who knew good food. "You got the gift, baby girl," she used to tell me, watching as I stirred pots and tasted sauces. "Same gift I got from my mama, same gift she got from hers. Don't you ever let nobody tell you different." But I had let someone tell me different. I had married Vernon Carter, with his accounting degree and his proper family, and his certainty that he knew best about everything. And slowly, year by year, I had let him convince me that my grandmother's gift was really just a hobby, that my talent was really just mediocrity, that my dreams were really just fantasies. I slipped out of bed and walked to the kitchen, moving quietly so as not to wake Vernon. The remnants of dinner had been cleaned away, but the scent of gumbo still lingered in the air. I opened the refrigerator and looked at the leftover pot, at the meal I had spent 3 days perfecting. I took out a spoon and tasted it cold, straight from the container. It was magnificent. The flavors had melded overnight, the heat and smoke and depth creating a symphony on my tongue. This was not flat or lacking. This was food that could stand alongside any restaurant in the city. Vernon was wrong. He had always been wrong. The realization hit me like a physical blow. For 20 years, I had believed his assessments over my own judgment. I had trusted his palate over mine. I had let his voice become louder than my grandmother's, louder than my own instincts, louder than the truth. Never again. I put the gumbo back in the refrigerator and walked to the living room, where my laptop sat on the desk. I opened it and started searching, not sure what I was looking for, but certain I needed to find something. The search results populated the screen: cooking classes in Atlanta, culinary competitions, restaurant jobs. And then, one listing caught my eye. Atlanta Amateur Cook-Off, $5,000 grand prize, open to non-professional cooks, registration deadline, 2 weeks. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. A cooking competition. A chance to have my food judged by people who were not Vernon, not Dolores, not anyone with a vested interest in keeping me small. What if I entered? What if I let strangers taste my cooking and tell me honestly whether it was good or not? The thought was terrifying. After 20 years of being told I was mediocre, the idea of putting myself out there, of risking public confirmation of my husband's criticisms, made my stomach clench with anxiety. But another part of me, the part that remembered my grandmother's kitchen, the part that had tasted the gumbo and known it was perfect, that part whispered, "Do it." I bookmarked the page and closed the laptop. I would think about it. I would not decide tonight. But as I walked back to the bedroom, I knew I had already decided. I was going to enter that competition, and I was going to find out, once and for all, whether Vernon was right about me. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, while Vernon was at work, I transformed our kitchen into a laboratory of flavor. I tested recipes I had been afraid to try for years, dishes that Vernon would have dismissed as too ambitious or too ethnic or too something. I cooked with abandon, with joy, with a freedom I had not felt since before my marriage. The competition required each contestant to prepare one signature dish that represented their culinary identity. I knew immediately what I would make: my grandmother's gumbo, elevated. The same recipe I had served at our anniversary dinner, but refined even further, every element perfected to showcase the depth of Louisiana cooking. I sourced the best ingredients I could find: andouille sausage from a specialty butcher who imported it from Louisiana, Gulf shrimp, fresh and sweet, from a fishmonger who knew exactly where his product came from, okra from a farmer's market vendor who grew heirloom varieties. Every component was carefully selected, each one a building block in the dish I was creating. Maya came over one afternoon to taste my practice batches. She was the only person I had told about the competition, the only person I trusted with this secret. Mom. She set down her spoon after the first bite, her eyes wide. This is incredible. Really? Even now, after weeks of trusting my own judgment, I still needed the validation. Vernon's voice was hard to silence. Really? This is better than any restaurant gumbo I've ever had. She took another bite, then another. You have to enter this competition. You're going to win. I don't know about winning. There will be a lot of talented cooks there. Mom. Maya reached across the table and took my hand. I need you to hear me. You are one of the most talented cooks I have ever encountered. The only reason you don't know that is because Dad has spent 20 years making you doubt yourself. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Maya, I've watched him do it my whole life. Every dinner, every holiday, every meal you put your heart into, he finds something wrong. And Grandma Dolores is even worse. Maya's grip tightened. But I've eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants, Mom. I've traveled and tasted food from all over the world, and your cooking is better. It has soul. It has history. It has love in every bite. I wiped my eyes, embarrassed by the emotion. I don't know when I stopped believing in myself. I know exactly when. It was the year I turned 8. You made this amazing birthday cake, 3 layers, homemade frosting, decorated with flowers, and Dad said it was a bit too sweet and asked why you hadn't just ordered from a bakery like normal people. Maya's expression hardened. I remember watching your face fall. I remember thinking, even as a kid, that something was wrong with the way Dad talked to you. He's not all bad, I heard myself say, the automatic defense I had been making for years. No, but he's not good to you, Mom, and you deserve better. The day of the competition arrived, a Saturday in early March. I told Vernon I was going to a gardening workshop with a friend, a lie that came more easily than I expected. He barely looked up from his newspaper. Have fun, he said. Try not to spend too much money on plants we don't need. I drove to the competition venue with my ingredients carefully packed in coolers, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and excitement. The cook-off was held in a community center downtown, with 50 amateur cooks competing for the grand prize. The judging panel included local food writers, restaurant owners, and one special guest, Chef Marcus Thompson, the owner of Indigo, one of Atlanta's most celebrated restaurants. I set up my station and tried not to look at the other competitors. Some of them seemed confident, experienced, moving through their prep work with professional efficiency. I felt like a fraud, a housewife who had wandered into a world where she did not belong. But then I started cooking, and everything else faded away. The roux came together perfectly, the flour toasting in the oil until it reached that precise chocolate color. The trinity sizzled in the pot, releasing aromas that transported me back to my grandmother's kitchen. The stock, which I had made from scratch the day before, added depth and body. The shrimp went in at exactly the right moment, cooking just until they curled. For 2 hours, I forgot about Vernon. I forgot about the judges. I forgot about everything except the food in front of me, the alchemy of turning simple ingredients into something extraordinary. When time was called, I plated my gumbo with trembling hands. A deep bowl, the rich brown stew ladled over perfect white rice, garnished with scallions and a drizzle of the good hot sauce I had brought from home. It looked beautiful. It smelled divine. The judging was anonymous, each dish identified only by number. I watched from across the room as the judges tasted their way through the entries, making notes, conferring quietly. When they reached my gumbo, I held my breath. Chef Marcus Thompson took a bite. Then another, then another. He said something to the food writer beside him, who nodded enthusiastically. He wrote something on his scorecard and moved on. I had no idea what any of it meant. The waiting was agony. An hour later, the results were announced. In third place, with her deconstructed baklava, contestant number 32. Not me. I felt a mix of relief and disappointment. In second place, with his Korean short rib tacos, contestant number 18. Still not me. My heart was sinking. I had not even placed. Vernon was right. I was mediocre. just like he always said. And in first place, winning the $5,000 grand prize and the title of Atlanta's best amateur cook? I closed my eyes, not wanting to see someone else accept the prize I had hoped for. Contestant number 47, with her New Orleans heritage gumbo, please come to the stage. I did not move. I could not have heard that correctly. Maya grabbed my arm. She had snuck into the venue to watch the announcement, hiding in the back of the room. Mom, that's you, number 47. I walked to the stage in a daze. The applause seemed to come from very far away. Someone handed me an oversized check and a trophy. Chef Marcus Thompson shook my hand, his grip warm and firm. That was exceptional gumbo, he said quietly, so only I could hear. Who taught you to cook like that? My grandmother, in New Orleans. She taught you well. He studied my face with an intensity that made me want to look away. Are you a professional cook? No, just a home cook. I've never worked in a restaurant. Why not? The question stopped me. Why not? Because Vernon said restaurants fail. Because his mother said cooking was a hobby, not a career. Because I had been told for 20 years that I was not good enough. I don't know, I said honestly. Chef Marcus handed me a business card. Come see me next week. I think you have something special, and I'd like to talk about what you might do with it. I left the competition with a trophy under my arm, a check in my purse, and a business card that felt like a key to another life. I had won. Against 50 other cooks, many of whom had more confidence and experience than I did, I had won. Vernon was wrong. He had always been wrong. And now I had proof. Chapter 2. Complete 1,569 words. Let me expand to reach 2,000 words. That evening I served dinner as usual. Vernon sat at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone between bites, offering his customary critique. The chicken is a little dry tonight, he said. Did you overcook it? Maybe, I said, and smiled. He looked up, something flickering in his expression. You seem cheerful. Did something happen at your gardening workshop? Just a good day? I took a bite of the chicken, which was perfectly moist, and savored it. A really good day. The trophy and check were hidden in my car, tucked under a blanket in the trunk. I was not ready to tell Vernon about the competition. Part of me knew he would find a way to diminish it, to explain why winning an amateur cook-off did not mean anything. He would say the judges had poor taste, or the competition was weak, or I had just gotten lucky. But another part of me wanted to hold this victory close for a while longer, to let it settle into my bones before subjecting it to Vernon's scrutiny. For 20 years, he had been the authority on my cooking. Now I had another opinion, a panel of experts who had tasted my food and declared it the best. I could feel something shifting inside me, like tectonic plates beginning to move. The life I had been living, the marriage I had been enduring, the self I had been suppressing, none of it felt stable anymore. The competition had cracked something open, and I could not put it back. The following week, I went to see Chef Marcus Thompson at his restaurant, Indigo. It was a sleek, modern space in Midtown, the kind of place that appeared in food magazines and attracted celebrities. I had eaten there once, years ago, for a special occasion. The food had been extraordinary. Mrs. Carter, Chef Marcus greeted me in his office, a small room off the kitchen that smelled of coffee and spices. Thank you for coming. Please, call me Nadine. Nadine. He smiled, gesturing for me to sit. I've been thinking about you since the competition. That gumbo was one of the best things I've tasted in years. The technique was flawless, but more than that, there was soul in that dish. History. Love. I felt my cheeks warm. Thank you. It's my grandmother's recipe. Tell me about her. So I did. I told him about Josephine Williams, about her kitchen in New Orleans, about the catering business she had built from nothing. I told him about learning to cook at her side, about the traditions she had passed down, about the gift she always said I had inherited. And yet, you never pursued cooking professionally, Chef Marcus said. Why? I hesitated. The truth felt too personal to share with a stranger, but something about his steady gaze, his genuine interest, made me want to be honest. My husband discouraged it. He said restaurants were too risky, that I should focus on a stable career. I paused. And over time, I started to believe I wasn't good enough. He criticizes my cooking. Has for years. I stopped trusting my own judgment. Chef Marcus was quiet for a moment. My mother was the same way with my father. He told her for 30 years that her singing was mediocre. After he died, she joined a church choir. Turns out she had a beautiful voice. Everyone said so. She just never heard it because his voice was louder. I felt tears threaten and blinked them back. That's exactly it. His voice is so loud. Then maybe it's time to find your own voice again. Chef Marcus leaned forward. I'm not going to pretend this is purely altruistic. I see talent, and I want to develop it. But I also see a woman who has been told she's less than she is, and I want to help prove that wrong. What are you proposing? Come work for me. Start in the kitchen, learn the professional side of cooking. It won't be glamorous. You'll start at the bottom, doing prep work, learning systems. But if you have what I think you have, you'll rise quickly. And eventually, maybe, you'll be ready to open something of your own. My own restaurant. The dream I had put aside 20 years ago. I can't, I heard myself say. My husband would never. With respect, Nadine, I'm not asking your husband. I'm asking you. The words hung in the air between us. I'm asking you, not Vernon, not Dolores, me. Can I think about it? I asked finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. Chef Marcus stood and extended his hand. But Nadine, don't take too long. Life is short, and you've already spent 20 years cooking for someone who doesn't appreciate it. Maybe it's time to cook for someone who does. I drove home in a daze, my mind churning with possibilities I had not allowed myself to consider in years. A job in a professional kitchen, a path toward my own restaurant, a life where my cooking was valued, not criticized. All I had to do was be brave enough to take it. I waited another month before confronting Vernon. I needed time to prepare, not just logistically, but emotionally. 20 years of marriage could not be undone in a moment. There were finances to consider, logistics to arrange, courage to gather. But more than that, I needed to be sure. Sure that I was not overreacting, not being dramatic, not throwing away a marriage over something petty. Vernon had never hit me. He had never cheated, as far as I knew. He provided for our family, showed up to the children's events, maintained a respectable home. Was constant criticism really enough to leave? I found my answer in an unexpected place. My daughter's words. Maya came over for lunch one afternoon, and we talked about her own relationship, a new boyfriend she was getting serious about. He makes me feel like the best version of myself, she said, her eyes shining. When I'm with him, I feel capable and beautiful and smart. He never makes me feel small. Never makes me feel small. The phrase echoed in my mind for days afterward. Vernon made me feel small. That was the truth I had been avoiding for 20 years. Every criticism, every comparison to his mother, every dismissive comment about my dreams, they were designed to keep me small, to keep me dependent, to keep me from believing I could be anything more than his wife, his cook, his audience for the Vernon Carter show. I was done being small. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday evening after dinner. I had made pot roast, Vernon's favorite, partly as a peace offering and partly as a test. Sure enough, he had found fault. The meat was slightly overdone, the gravy needed more pepper, the potatoes were cut too thick. I let him finish his critique. Then I took a breath and said, Vernon, we need to talk. He looked up from his phone, mildly curious. About what? About us. About this marriage. About the way you've treated me for 20 years. His expression shifted to wariness. Nadine, what is this about? I placed the trophy from the cooking competition on the table between us. His eyes went to it, then back to my face, confusion evident. What is that? First place. Atlanta Amateur Cook-Off. I kept my voice steady. 50 competitors, professional judges, including Chef Marcus Thompson from Indigo. And I won. Vernon stared at the trophy, then at me. When did this happen? A month ago, while you were at work. I watched emotions flicker across his face. Surprise, confusion, and something darker. Resentment, perhaps, or fear. Why didn't you tell me? Because I knew what you would say. You would find a way to diminish it, to explain why it didn't matter, why the judges were wrong, why I shouldn't get my hopes up. I took another breath. And I was right, wasn't I? Even now, you're not saying congratulations. You're not saying you're proud of me. You're asking why I kept it secret. Because it's strange. Vernon's voice rose. My wife enters a cooking competition without telling me, wins, and hides it for a month? That's not normal, Nadine. What's not normal is a husband who spends 20 years telling his wife her cooking isn't good enough. What's not normal is constantly being compared to your mother, who couldn't season a chicken if her life depended on it. The words were coming now, years of suppressed truth pouring out. What's not normal is being so beaten down that you can't even recognize your own talent anymore. Vernon's face went hard. So that's what this is. You think I've been unfair to you? You think my trying to help you improve is some kind of abuse? Abuse? I tasted the word. It felt accurate. Yes, I think that's exactly what it is. Not physical abuse, but you've spent 2 decades systematically destroying my confidence, making me dependent on your approval, ensuring that I never believed I was good enough to pursue my dreams. That's ridiculous. But there was something in his voice, a hint of recognition that he quickly suppressed. I've supported this family for 20 years. I've provided for you and the children. I've never raised a hand to you. You raised your voice, your criticism, your constant, relentless judgment. I stood, needing to be at eye level with him. You told me my cooking wasn't good enough. Professional judges say differently. You told me I shouldn't pursue my dreams. Chef Marcus Thompson offered me a job in his kitchen. That stopped him. What? He wants to train me. He says I have talent, that with professional development, I could open my own restaurant someday. I paused. I'm taking the job, Vernon, and I'm moving out. Moving out? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. And where are you going to live? You don't have any money of your own. I have the prize money from the competition, and I'll be earning a salary at Indigo. I had planned this, had done the math, had found a small apartment I could afford. I'm not asking for your permission. I'm telling you my decision. You're throwing away 20 years of marriage over cooking? Vernon's voice was incredulous. Over some amateur contest and a job offer? I'm throwing away a marriage where I was never respected, never appreciated, never allowed to be anything more than what you decided I could be. I walked to the closet and pulled out the suitcase I had packed earlier that day. I've already talked to a lawyer. We can do this amicably, or we can do it painfully. That choice is yours. Vernon stood frozen, watching me gather my things. For a moment, something shifted in his expression, something that might have been regret, or fear, or even the beginning of an apology. But then it hardened again, the familiar mask of superiority settling back into place. You won't make it, he said. Restaurants are hard. Kitchens are brutal. You're a 46-year-old woman with no professional experience. You're going to fail, and when you do, don't come crawling back to me. I picked up my suitcase and walked to the door. Then I turned back, looking at the man I had married 20 years ago, the man I had thought would be my partner, my support, my champion. Maybe I'll fail, I said, but at least I'll have tried. At least I'll know what I'm capable of, and at least I'll never have to hear you tell me I'm not good enough again. I walked out the door and did not look back. The first months on my own were the hardest of my life. The apartment I had found was small and sparse, a 1-bedroom in a building that had seen better days. After 20 years in a comfortable suburban home, the adjustment was jarring. But it was mine. For the first time in my adult life, I had a space that belonged entirely to me, where no one could criticize how I arranged the furniture or what I cooked for dinner. The job at Indigo was exactly as Chef Marcus had described, unglamorous, exhausting, and humbling. I started as a prep cook, spending hours chopping vegetables, making stocks, preparing mise en place for the line cooks. My hands ached, my feet throbbed. I came home smelling of onions and sweat, too tired to do anything but collapse into bed. But I was learning. Every day I absorbed something new, techniques I had never known, flavor combinations I had never considered, the precise choreography of a professional kitchen. Chef Marcus pushed me hard, harder than he pushed the younger cooks, because he knew I could take it. "You're not here to dabble," he told me during one particularly brutal shift. "You're here to become something. That means I'm not going to go easy on you." "I don't want you to," I said. And I meant it. The children were supportive, each in their own way. Maya came to visit every week, bringing groceries and encouragement. Marcus Jr., who had been more reserved during the separation, came to Indigo one night and sat at the bar, watching me work. "Dad told me you'd fail," he said afterward. "He said you were having a midlife crisis and would come crawling back within 6 months. What do you think?" Marcus Jr. looked at me with eyes that reminded me painfully of his father's. But the expression in them was different. Warm, proud, approving. "I think Dad's scared," he said. "I think he's always been scared that you were better than him at something, and he kept you down because it made him feel bigger." He paused. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, Mom. I should have defended you. You were a child. Children don't see their parents clearly. I'm not a child anymore, and I see you." He hugged me, a real hug, the kind we had not shared since he was small. "You're going to do amazing things. I believe in you." Vernon tried to undermine me in subtler ways. He called mutual friends and complained about my abandonment, painting himself as the victim of an ungrateful wife who had thrown away a good marriage over a cooking hobby. Some people believed him. Others, who had watched our dynamic for years, quietly reached out to offer support. Dolores was the most vocal critic, of course. She called me once, shortly after I moved out, to deliver a lecture about duty and commitment. "Vernon gave you everything," she said. "A beautiful home, financial security, a good life. And you repaid him by running off to play chef. It's shameful." I listened without interrupting. Then I said, "Mrs. Carter, your son spent 20 years telling me I was a mediocre cook. Professional chefs disagree. I'm going to spend the rest of my life finding out who was right." I hung up before she could respond. The divorce proceedings were complicated but not contentious. Vernon, for all his bluster, did not want the embarrassment of a public fight. We divided assets fairly, agreed on terms that left both of us financially stable, and signed the papers without drama. After 20 years, our marriage ended with a signature and a handshake. I felt nothing when it was over. No grief, no relief, just a quiet sense of something completed. The chapter was closed. A new one was beginning. At Indigo, I rose quickly through the ranks. Within a year, I had moved from prep cook to line cook to sous chef, my trajectory accelerated by talent and work ethic. Chef Marcus began consulting me on menu development, incorporating elements of Southern cuisine that I suggested. "You have a voice," he told me one night, after a particularly successful service. "A culinary point of view that's distinctly yours. It's rare and valuable. What do I do with it? Eventually, you open your own place. You share that voice with the world." He smiled. "But not yet. You're not ready. Soon, but not yet." I nodded, willing to wait. I had waited 20 years already. What was another year or two? But somewhere deep inside, I could feel it building. The dream I had set aside, the vision I had suppressed, the restaurant I had always wanted to create. It was coming. I could sense it, the way you sense a storm approaching on the horizon. My time was coming. 2 years after leaving Vernon, I opened Heritage. The name had come to me during a late night at Indigo, as I was developing a dish based on my grandmother's red beans and rice. Everything I wanted to do as a chef traced back to her, to the traditions she had passed down, to the flavors that ran through my blood like memory. My restaurant would honor that lineage, the heritage of Black Southern cooking, elevated but never pretentious, sophisticated but still soulful. The space was in the old Fourth Ward neighborhood, a part of Atlanta that was rapidly gentrifying but still maintained its historic character. It was small, only 40 seats, and had required every penny I had saved, plus a small business loan that Chef Marcus had helped me secure. The renovation took 4 months of blood, sweat, and more than a few tears. Opening night was terrifying. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the team I had assembled, young cooks who believed in my vision, who wanted to learn from me the way I had learned from Chef Marcus, and felt the weight of everything that had led to this moment. 20 years of marriage to a man who said I could not cook. 22 years since I had first told Vernon about my dream of owning a restaurant. 46 years since my grandmother had put a wooden spoon in my hand and started teaching me the secrets of her kitchen. "Service!" The call came from the front of house, and we began. The menu was everything I had ever wanted to create. Shrimp and grits with a tomato andouille gravy, fried chicken that I brined for 24 hours and served with a honey cayenne drizzle, collard greens braised with smoked turkey and finished with apple cider vinegar, bourbon pecan pie with vanilla bean ice cream. Each dish was a love letter to my grandmother, to New Orleans, to the traditions that had shaped me. The first service was chaotic, as first services always are. We ran out of the gumbo special by 8 p.m. One of the line cooks burned a batch of cornbread. A waiter dropped a tray of drinks. But by the end of the night, we had served 40 covers, and every single plate had come back clean. In the weeks that followed, word began to spread. Local food bloggers visited and posted glowing reviews. A small mention appeared in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And then, 3 months after opening, a full-length feature in Atlanta magazine, titled The Rise of Nadine Carter, From Home Cook to Culinary Star. The article told my story, or part of it. The competition that had changed my life, the training at Indigo, the dream deferred and finally pursued. I did not talk about Vernon in the interview. That chapter of my life was over, and I had no interest in airing old grievances in public. But anyone who knew our history could read between the lines. Vernon certainly could. He appeared at the restaurant one evening, 6 months after we opened. I was in the kitchen when my sous chef told me there was someone at the bar asking to see me. "He says he's your ex-husband." I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the front of house, my heart pounding. I had not seen Vernon since signing the divorce papers. I had no idea what he wanted. He looked the same, still handsome, still polished, still carrying himself with the assurance of a man who believed he was the smartest person in any room. But there was something different in his eyes, something that might have been regret. "Nadine." He stood as I approached. "The place looks amazing." "Thank you." I kept my voice neutral. "What are you doing here, Vernon?" "I wanted to see it, to see what you built." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been hearing things. People talking about this restaurant, about you. I wanted to see for myself. And it's impressive. Really impressive." He looked around the dining room, at the tables full of satisfied customers, at the art on the walls celebrating Black Southern culture. "I underestimated you." "Yes, you did." Vernon took a breath. "Nadine, I've been thinking a lot about our marriage, about the things I said, the way I treated you. I know I wasn't always supportive. You were never supportive. Not once in 20 years. He flinched but did not argue. "You're right, I wasn't. And I'm sorry for that." The apology hung in the air between us. It was more than I had ever expected from Vernon, more than I had thought him capable of. But it came too late, too little, and it changed nothing. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally, "but it doesn't change anything between us. I'm not asking for another chance. I know I don't deserve one." Vernon hesitated. "But I wanted you to know. I always knew you were talented. I think I was jealous, maybe. Scared that if you pursued cooking, you would realize you didn't need me. I didn't need you, Vernon. I never did. You just made me think I did. I know. And I'm sorry." He pulled out his wallet. "Let me pay for my meal and get out of your way. I didn't come to cause trouble. The meal is on the house." I did not know why I said it. Perhaps because I felt in some strange way that I owed him nothing and therefore could afford to be generous. "Consider it a gesture of closure." Vernon nodded, something complicated moving across his face. "Thank you, Nadine, for everything. And I hope you get everything you deserve." He left without looking back. I returned to the kitchen and threw myself into the dinner service, channeling the emotions stirred up by his visit into the food I was creating. Later that night, after the last cover had been served and the kitchen cleaned, I sat alone in the dining room with a glass of wine. Vernon's visit had unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. Not because I had any desire to go back, I did not, but because it forced me to confront the waste of those 20 years. The talent I had suppressed, the confidence I had lost, the dreams I had deferred. But perhaps the waste was not total. Perhaps those years had taught me something too. Patience, resilience, the ability to endure criticism without being destroyed by it. Every chef faced harsh reviews, demanding customers, impossible standards. I had been training for that my whole marriage. Vernon had tried to break me. Instead, he had made me stronger. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. My sous chef stood in the doorway, looking excited. "Chef, there's a rumor going around. Someone saw a Michelin inspector at table 12 tonight." My heart stopped. "Are you sure?" "Not positive, but the description matches. Young woman, eating alone, taking notes, asking detailed questions about ingredients and techniques. The Michelin Guide, the highest recognition in the culinary world. A single star could transform a restaurant, could validate a chef's entire career. If it's true," I said carefully, "then we give them a reason to come back." The sous chef nodded and disappeared. I sat alone in the darkness, thinking about stars and dreams and the long, winding road that had brought me here. Maybe it was just a rumor. Maybe the inspector was nothing more than a food blogger with careful habits. But maybe, just maybe, the universe was preparing to give me exactly what I deserved. The months that followed were a study in controlled intensity. We had no way of confirming whether Michelin inspectors had visited Heritage, but the possibility galvanized the entire team. Every plate that left the kitchen was treated as if it might be scrutinized by the most exacting standards in the culinary world. Every component was perfected. Every service was approached with the seriousness of a final exam. I drove myself harder than ever before, arriving at the restaurant at 6 in the morning and leaving after midnight. I tested new dishes, refined existing ones, pushed my cooks to exceed their own expectations. Chef Marcus visited occasionally, offering guidance and perspective, reminding me to breathe. "You can't force a star," he told me one evening. "You can only create the conditions for it to be possible. Focus on the food, on the experience, on being true to your vision. If it's meant to happen, it will. And if it doesn't, then you'll still have built something remarkable, a restaurant that matters, a career that proves everyone who doubted you wrong." He smiled. "The star would be wonderful, Nadine, but it's not the only measure of success." I knew he was right, but I could not shake the hunger for that recognition, the desire to have my talent validated in the most public way possible. After 20 years of being told I was mediocre, I wanted the world to declare otherwise. I wanted proof I could hold in my hands. The rumors continued. Food writers mentioned that Michelin was expanding its coverage in Atlanta, that several restaurants were being considered for the upcoming guide. Heritage was mentioned as a possibility, though always with caveats. We were new, we were small, we were unknown on the national stage. But we were also undeniably excellent. The reviews kept coming, each one more glowing than the last. The waiting list for reservations stretched to 3 weeks. Local celebrities and visiting dignitaries made Heritage their destination of choice. We were becoming, slowly but surely, an institution. One evening, 8 months after Vernon's visit, I received a phone call that changed everything. "Ms. Carter?" The voice was professional, formal. "This is the Michelin Guide North America. We're calling to invite you to our upcoming star revelation ceremony in New York." My hand tightened on the phone. "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" "Your restaurant, Heritage, has been selected to receive recognition in the upcoming Michelin Guide." We would like you to attend the ceremony to learn the specific nature of that recognition. I sat down heavily, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Recognition could mean many things. The bib gourmand, for excellent value. A plate designation, for quality. Or it could mean a star. Can you tell me what category? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The specific recognitions will be announced at the ceremony, but I can tell you that your presence is highly encouraged. It will be a significant moment. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time, letting the implications wash over me. Michelin did not invite chefs to the star ceremony unless they were receiving a star. The bib gourmand announcements were handled separately, more casually. This was it. This was really happening. I called Maya first, then Marcus Jr., then Chef Marcus Thompson. Each conversation was tearful and celebratory. After years of doubt, years of being told I was not good enough, I was about to receive one of the highest honors in the culinary world. Then, for reasons I could not fully explain, I called Vernon. He answered on the third ring. Nadine? I'm getting a Michelin star, I said. No preamble, no small talk. I just got the call. The ceremony is next month. Silence on the other end. Then, congratulations. That's remarkable. I wanted you to know. I don't know why, but I wanted you to know. I'm glad you told me. Another pause. You deserved this, Nadine. You always deserved this. I was too blind to see it. Yes, you were. We said goodbye without lingering. There was nothing left to say between us, no relationship to salvage or wounds to reopen. But somehow, telling him had felt necessary. A final chapter, definitively closed. I spent the next month in a haze of anticipation and preparation. The restaurant continued to operate at full capacity, the team galvanized by the news that their work might be receiving the ultimate validation. Every night, I walked through the dining room and felt a surge of pride in what we had built. This was my dream. After 20 years of suppression, after a lifetime of doubt, my dream had come true. And in New York, a star was waiting for me. The Michelin star revelation ceremony was held in a grand ballroom at a Manhattan hotel, filled with the biggest names in American cuisine. Chefs I had read about in magazines, whose cookbooks lined my shelves, walked past me in the crowd. I felt like an imposter among giants, a home cook from Atlanta who had somehow stumbled into the pantheon of culinary greatness. Maya and Marcus Jr. flanked me on either side, my children who had watched me transform from a suppressed housewife into a celebrated chef. Chef Marcus Thompson sat behind us, beaming like a proud father. They were my family now, my real family, the people who had believed in me when I could not believe in myself. The ceremony proceeded through various categories, building toward the main event, the announcement of new one-star restaurants. The tension in the room was palpable, chefs leaning forward in their seats, waiting to hear if their life's work would be recognized. And now, the presenter announced, the new one-star recipients for the United States. The names were called alphabetically. I held my breath as we moved through the alphabet, my heart pounding harder with each passing moment. Heritage, Atlanta, Georgia, Chef Nadine Carter. The room erupted in applause. Maya grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. Marcus Jr. was on his feet, cheering. Chef Marcus nodded at me with a smile that said everything. You did it. I walked to the stage on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The Michelin representative handed me a plaque, a physical symbol of everything I had fought for. Flashbulbs exploded around me. Voices called my name. Ms. Carter, would you like to say a few words? I stepped to the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces, trying to process the magnitude of the moment. When I was 6 years old, I began, my voice trembling slightly, my grandmother put a wooden spoon in my hand and taught me how to make a roux. She told me I had a gift, that cooking was in my blood, that I should never let anyone tell me different. I paused, composing myself. For 20 years, someone did tell me different. Someone I trusted, someone I loved, spent 2 decades convincing me that my cooking was mediocre, that I wasn't good enough. that my dreams of opening a restaurant were foolish and unrealistic. The room was absolutely silent. I believed him for a long time. I suppressed my talent, ignored my instincts, stopped trusting my own palate. I became what he said I was: ordinary, undistinguished, not quite good enough. I looked at the plaque in my hands, feeling the weight of it, the meaning of it. But something in me never completely died. Something my grandmother planted when I was 6 years old. Something that survived 20 years of criticism and doubt. 3 years ago, I entered a cooking competition on a whim. I won. And for the first time in decades, I heard someone who wasn't my grandmother tell me that my cooking was exceptional. I looked out at the audience, finding Maya's face in the crowd, streaming with tears. I want to thank Chef Marcus Thompson, who saw my potential and helped me develop it. I want to thank my children, Maya and Marcus, who never doubted me even when I doubted myself. And I want to thank my grandmother, Josephine Williams, who taught me everything I know and whose spirit lives in every dish I create. I took a breath. But most of all, I want to say this to anyone out there who has been told they're not good enough. Anyone whose dreams have been dismissed, whose talents have been diminished, whose confidence has been systematically destroyed. You are not what they say you are. Your gifts are real. Your dreams are valid. And it is never too late to claim the life you were meant to live. The applause that followed was thunderous. I left the stage in a daze, clutching the plaque, feeling lighter than I had in years. The celebration at Heritage that night was unlike anything we had experienced. The entire team gathered, champagne flowing, tears and laughter mixing in equal measure. Every cook who had worked to make this moment possible was there, celebrating not just my achievement, but our collective triumph. Maya made a toast that left everyone in tears. "To my mother," she said, raising her glass, "who showed me what it means to never give up on yourself, who proved that it's never too late to pursue your dreams, and who makes the best damn gumbo in the entire world." "To Nadine!" the room chorused. Later, after the celebration had wound down and the staff had gone home, I sat alone in my kitchen. The Michelin plaque hung on the wall, its polished surface catching the light. I stared at it for a long time, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. I thought about my grandmother, stirring pots in her New Orleans kitchen, teaching me the secrets of Southern cooking. I thought about Vernon, sitting at our dining room table, telling me the gumbo was flat. I thought about the competition that had changed my life, the training at Indigo, the terrifying leap of opening my own restaurant. 20 years of being told I was not enough. 3 years of proving I was more than enough. The path had been long and painful, but it had led me here. To this kitchen, to this star, to this life that was finally, completely my own. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I did not recognize. I opened it to find a message. "Congratulations on the star. I saw the announcement. You deserve it. V. Vernon." Even now, even after everything, he could not let the moment pass without inserting himself into it. I stared at the message, debating how to respond. Then I deleted it without replying and set my phone aside. He had taken enough of my time, enough of my energy, enough of my life. He did not get to be part of this moment too. I stood and walked through my restaurant, running my hands over the tables, the chairs, the bar where customers gathered to sample my cuisine. This was my creation, my vision, my gift to the world. Every dish that left this kitchen carried a piece of my grandmother's legacy, a piece of my own story. 20 years of criticism had not destroyed me. They had refined me, like fire refines steel. I was stronger than I had ever been, more confident, more certain of my gifts. And I had a star to prove it. I turned off the lights and locked the door, stepping out into the Atlanta night. The air was warm, fragrant with the scent of magnolias, full of possibility. Tomorrow, there would be prep to do, menus to plan, a restaurant to run. Tomorrow, I would continue the work that had brought me here, continuing to honor my grandmother's memory and build on her legacy. But tonight, I allowed myself to simply feel the triumph. to stand in the darkness and know that I had done something remarkable. For 20 years, my husband had mocked my cooking. Now I had a Michelin star, and nothing had ever tasted so sweet. 3 years after receiving that first star, Heritage was awarded a second. The ceremony was held in the same Manhattan ballroom, but this time I walked in as an established chef, not a nervous newcomer. The food world knew my name now. My face had appeared on magazine covers, on cooking shows, in documentaries about the evolution of Southern cuisine. The little restaurant in Old Fourth Ward had become a destination, drawing visitors from around the world who wanted to taste what I had created. The second star came with its own speech, its own celebration, its own wave of media attention, but it felt different this time. The first star had been about vindication, about proving that Vernon and his mother and everyone who had doubted me had been wrong. The second star was simply about excellence, about continuing to push, to grow, to create food that moved people. I opened a second restaurant the following year, a more casual concept that made my grandmother's recipes accessible to a wider audience. Then a third in New York, which earned its own Michelin star within 18 months. The empire grew, not through ambition, but through the simple desire to share the food I loved with as many people as possible. The children thrived in their own ways. Maya went to culinary school, worked in my kitchen for 2 years, and then struck out on her own, opening a bakery that specialized in Southern desserts. Marcus Jr. became a lawyer, but he handled all the legal work for my restaurants, keeping my business in the family. Vernon remarried, I heard, to a woman 15 years younger who could not cook at all. According to Maya, who kept loose tabs on her father, he ate most of his meals at restaurants now, finally experiencing what it was like to have someone else prepare his food. I felt nothing when I heard about his new marriage. No jealousy, no bitterness, no residual anger. Vernon belonged to a chapter of my life that was definitively closed. He had played his role, the antagonist who pushed me to prove my worth, and now he was irrelevant. I wished him well, in an abstract way, the way you might wish well a stranger you passed on the street. Dolores passed away 2 years after my first star, still insisting to anyone who would listen that her cooking had always been superior to mine. I did not attend the funeral, but I sent flowers. Whatever harm she had done was part of the past, and the past had no power over me anymore. Chef Marcus Thompson retired from Indigo and sold the restaurant to his sous chef. We remained close, meeting for dinner whenever our schedules allowed, talking about food and life and the strange paths that had brought us together. "I always knew you had it in you," he told me one evening, over glasses of wine at Heritage. "From that first taste of your gumbo at the competition. There are a lot of people who can cook well, but there are very few who can cook with soul. You're one of them. You gave me a chance when no one else would have. I gave you an opportunity. What you did with it was all you." He raised his glass. "To Josephine Williams, who started all this." "To Grandma Jo," I agreed, and we drank. My grandmother's spirit lived in everything I did. Her recipes formed the foundation of my cuisine. Her photograph hung in the kitchen of every restaurant I opened. Her wooden spoon, worn smooth by decades of stirring, sat in a place of honor in my office. She had given me the gift of cooking, and I had spent my life trying to be worthy of that gift. On the anniversary of my first Michelin star, I visited her grave in New Orleans. I brought flowers and a container of gumbo, which I left beside the headstone, knowing she would appreciate the gesture. "I did it, Grandma," I said, kneeling in the grass. "Everything you said I could do, I did. And I never let anyone tell me different." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, I could almost hear her voice. "That's my girl. I always knew you had the gift." I stood and wiped my eyes, looking out over the cemetery, thinking about the long road that had brought me here, the pain and the doubt and the years of suppression, the competition that had changed everything, the training, the restaurant, the stars. It had not been easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But I had done it. I had claimed my legacy, honored my grandmother's memory, built something that would outlast me. and I had done it all on my own terms. Walking back to my rental car, I passed a young woman tending a nearby grave. She looked up as I approached, recognition dawning in her eyes. "Are you Chef Nadine Carter?" "I am. I love your restaurants. Your food is incredible." She hesitated. "My mother used to say I was a good cook, but my husband thinks it's just a hobby. He doesn't take it seriously." I stopped and looked at her, seeing something of my younger self in her eyes. The doubt, the suppression, the talent that others refused to recognize. "Your mother was right," I said, "and your husband is wrong. Don't let anyone tell you your gifts aren't real. Don't let anyone steal your dreams." The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "How do you know?" I smiled and took her hand. "Because I spent 20 years listening to someone who told me the same thing. And then I stopped listening and I started cooking. And now I have 2 Michelin stars." I pressed a business card into her palm. "If you ever want to talk, or if you need guidance, call me. The world needs more women who trust their own talents." I walked away, leaving her standing among the graves, holding my card like a lifeline. Maybe she would call, maybe she would not. But I had planted a seed, the same seed my grandmother had planted in me, and perhaps someday it would grow into something beautiful. That was my legacy now. Not just the restaurants, not just the stars, but the women I could help along the way. The dreamers and the doubters and the ones who had been told they were not enough. I knew the truth now, the truth my grandmother had always known. We were always enough. We just had to believe it.